are today going to talk about interest rates and how it affects the buying process, and how it could affect sellers as well. And I figured we would defer to Maria on some of this because this is right up her alley. Um, so if you,
Yes, yes, and I just got off of a call with our like the person that heads our secondary market desk or the rate desk, just to get an update on where she sees things, and this is somebody that's been in the business for 35 plus years, and she said, she's, this is the, she really, it's like really the first time ever. Cause we said like, okay, well, where are rates going? Like, what's the prediction? And she's like, it is a crapshoot. Like she doesn't see rates like skyrocketing, right? But there is just so much going on, geopolitically, with the next 90 days with this tariff reprieve and what will happen with that, like, could force an outcome. The you know we think that mostly all we could say is that it's probably going to be more of the same, and the same has been where we're in a range of rates, and they're swinging as much as 50 to 100 basis points from week to week. So that means like anywhere from a quarter to a 0.5% swing. We had a couple of weeks ago where rates were probably at the lowest that they had been all year. And then in like 1 week's time, they were a 0.5% higher, right? This week, we've had rates like steadily come down each day, but like not to the level of that lowest level. So it's really, just a matter of, for buyers, right?
right.
It's a matter of your look, there are some people who you have to know what your risk aversion is, first of all, right? Are you somebody that feels if you already concede to the fact like, hey, my rate's going to probably be somewhere in the sixes, right? Whether it's 6.5 or 6.75 or 6.25, like I can afford it at any level. And if you're somebody that can afford the higher rate, but I ultimately would like the lower rate, then you're probably more apt to float and catch it when the rates dip. Because what we have seen, even not just this year, but even if we go back into like a year ago, going back in a year's time, is that rates will come up. And when we say up and down, right, we're talking about this like spread of maybe a 0.5%. So you have some days where they're up, some days where they're down, up, down. I mean, sometimes it looks more like this, not like that. But I can tell you, as somebody that's talking to customers and locking rate, talking about rate locks every day, 2 weeks ago, almost everybody I spoke to was like, yeah, you know what, let's go ahead and lock it because rates are about the lowest they've been.
Right.
Everybody I've spoken to this week has been more on the, you know what, I'm not closing until June or
That's
maybe even July, because in New York, right, loan closings are, 45 to 90 days. I feel like there's going to be another dip. Like let's watch rates. When they dip again, then we'll lock. So,
right.
um, so yeah, that's
It
that's it's just kind of a wild ride right now.
right. Is and locking long enough. Like I get those calls. Like, how long should we lock? Right. When
Yes.
lock? How close to the process? Because basically, a seller can drag their feet for the 30 days.
Yeah.
You close, and then you lock for. Sometimes I see people lock for 30 days, which is a huge mistake. Right.
Yes.
You could lock for 60. Almost lately, I think 90 is safer if you really have that rate that you want. It's
Yeah.
important,
Yeah.
but because no one's going to pay for that. Right. The seller doesn't care, and they're not obligated to pay for it. So
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a conversation that I'm having with every client, right? It's a little bit different, let's say, if you're buying a property in New Jersey or Pennsylvania, where typically the close period is 30 days, right? If you, if you, if you have a contract in Pennsylvania, you're closing on the date that's on the contract. And as you're just alluding to, Michelle, like that's not the case in New York, right? You have a, plus 30 days that can be added on. Um, but you know, there are, I mean, first of all, I would say anybody that's in New York that is locking for 30 days on a contract that has like a 30-day date on it, like they're also not getting good advice from their loan officer, right?
Right.
They're not being I don't think that that they're getting the proper expectations set, because if what happens, what first of all, here's a question that I'm always asked: what happens when I lock the rate and then let's say rates go down? Can I relock at the lower rate? No, but locking the rate means just that, right? We're locking the rate. We're hedging those funds. We're literally hedging them on our back end,
Right.
every lender is doing that. So when you do execute a rate lock, you are protecting yourself if rates go higher. But if rates go down an eighth or even a quarter percent, like you missed out on that, right? I try to, oftentimes I'll say, like, compare it to buying stock, right? You buy stock one day and then the price goes down the next day and you're like, well, wait a second, can I have the price, can I have today's price? No, you executed your lock, on that stock yesterday.
I,
And it's similar with rates, right?
I think also I think when the rates really started to increase a lot, people were very nervous, at least the
Yes,
buyers we have, very anxious about it. Should I buy?
yes,
Should I hold? I say in my rental. I think people are much more, I don't want to say comfortable, but they've accepted that the
they're
rates
used to it.
are no longer what they were during COVID. They clearly in the 6 to 7 range, five, somewhere between, let's say, 6 and 7.
Right.
There's they've adjusted to it mentally,
Yes,
right? I think that
yes.
I don't see a lot of buyers pulling out. Maybe Leslie
No,
had.
no, I see people maybe holding back or maybe not looking at the certain properties because of
Right.
the financing.
Also,
Uh,
the stock market in the
right,
last week, so it's
right.
been like a
Definitely in
double.
the last week or two,
Right.
it's definitely, I've seen people pull back a bit.
Yeah,
It's still very busy, right now.
Yeah.
And there's, limited inventory
yep,
still, so people
That is right.
and people still want to move out of the city and or
Well,
have a
even
different plan
right.
internally through Westchester.
yes.
They're not going to live their life based on that. I think that there is definitely still movement.
There definitely is. And I think Michelle really hit it on the head, right? Like I have like one particular client of mine who I did their mortgage back in the pandemic. They've had two babies since then.
Right.
They really need a bigger house. They have been looking in the, Westchester area. They've been outbid on everything over like the last year.
Right.
And also too, like they went in and out of the market because they were like, well, maybe rates will come down. Maybe we'll wait for that. Maybe we can afford more. And then like finally over the last couple of months, they're like, all right, we've just accepted that like this is like, first of all, we need a bigger
Right.
space where, we've accepted that rates are where they are, we'll deal with that down the road. Like, if rates come down, we'll refinance like everybody else will.
Right.
um they said to me, like, just tell me what's the max that we can afford. What can we get approved for, and then we're going to work around
I
that.
think right. I think people also they go through life transitions, right?
Yes.
And at some point, people say, "I have to move. I don't want to rent anymore." The rents are very high,
Yeah.
especially if they're coming from Manhattan. Even in Westchester, the rents are very high. So at some point, they have to say, you speak to their accountant, speak to their finance person. What's the bet? What should I really do? How should I proceed? And you
Right.
have to make decisions when you look at your whole portfolio and your whole life situation.
Right.
And I think that really impacts people's decision, even when, despite the interest rates, they have to look at people pass away, people get married, people have kids, people have job changes. So you have to make accommodations to your life situations. And I
Agreed.
think that, the interest rates are 6 or 7, maybe you'll just spend less on a house, but you may make the decision to buy.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm not seeing a lot of people pull out. I think people are a little nervous. I think more the stock market and
So
the
the last,
volatility
yes,
in
I think the
that.
last 2 weeks,
Yeah.
I've seen people become a little skittish, would be
Yeah.
the word.
Right.
Yeah.
Where
Well,
they may,
one of the things that, people who have some, have some money saved, whether it's in cash or in the stock market, can take advantage of with many lenders, including, the bank that I work for, is relationship pricing, right? So if you have investments and accounts with, a bank like Citizens or Chase or what have you, you can get further discounts on the rate, which can actually get you, like many people, in the fives, right? Which is a great
Yeah, that
rate.
was
But for the first time that I can even remember, I had like two clients in the last week say to me, "Hey, I want to move the money over like right now and get the discount applied because I'm worried about my balances on my investments dropping below, and then I won't be able to get the discount on the rate, right? Because you need to be at a certain threshold." So, yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of volatility. But with volatility can become a lot of opportunity too, right? So, if you do have, if you have some buyers that are coming out of the market, then that opens it up for these other buyers that have been in the bidding wars and trying to find something. But I feel so far it's been a pretty robust spring market.
yeah,
Um, and I think, like Michelle said, that people have adjusted to the rate range that we're in. The conversations that I have now are so different than the ones I had like a year and a half ago.
right,
Yeah, 2 years ago, and
right.
people were like really sticker shocked with everything. So, and also too, I want to remind everyone that rates like in the sixes are actually like where more the average rate has always been, right? Like we had this period of a few years where rates were lower, but that was not the norm. Like,
Right.
rates have more been in this range and higher, believe it or not, than lower.
Yeah,
So think about that
that's
too.
for sure. That's for sure. If you look way back, they were in the 18% range or the 6.
Yeah. Or even, or like, in the 10% range, and 7.5% and to 9.5% range. So yeah.
So listen, I think you have to, I think also, I think it's very interesting in terms of sellers when we want to renegotiate a price. Sellers are not always that eager to budge. Sometimes
No.
a few thousand off, but I just did a transaction. The seller said, absolutely not. We agreed on this price, take it or leave it.
Yeah.
I think there's enough interest in the market still where
Yes.
sellers take a hard-nosed position. And even with homes that need a lot of work, sometimes sellers would rather price it less and just also take a firm
I
position.
mean, Michelle, I would think, I think, because I think this is what you're saying. Like, whereas sometimes you can feel like it's very much a buyer's market or very much a seller's market, it feels quite even right now, right?
I think it really depends on the location. It depends on the situation. It depends on the seller's motivation, how quickly they have to exit.
Right.
Are they in a divorce situation? I think it depends. I can't say it's 100% the seller's market, although I think it still leans towards that side as
Mhm.
opposed to
To
smart.
buyers. Yeah.
Yeah,
Multiple offers.
right,
That's why everything has to move so
Yeah.
quickly.
right,
And you know, you're expected, at least from the attorney point of view, to look at the contract, review it as quickly as
right.
possible, because you don't want to. There's so
Lose it.
many backups. You don't want to
Right,
lose your backups.
right,
Right. Right.
right.
Right.
And
It's
even now,
tough.
I do diligence. I have to leave here now and I have to meet, people for estimates. I have to get like everything done where, maybe many years ago I could have a day or two to really pull estimates in, have people come in and give me prices on, things to be fixed or repaired in the house.
Mhm.
A very limited time
Yeah.
and like 24 hours to pull this together. You really have to be very quick because the sellers still have
Right.
the in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, at least in Westchester
Yeah.
Right.
County, I think that's
Yes, for sure in Westchester.
Okay,
All
so I
right.
want to everybody a happy Easter and the happy Passover and enjoy the holiday weekend. And it should be a
Yeah.
nice one in the New
yes.
York.
Finally, right? All right. Well, listen, happy holidays to you both and have a wonderful weekend.
You too. Be
Bye
well.
bye. Bye bye.